Well, it was we're almost at G Day, and one of the things that I picked up on Kirby talking about this week was how the team is segmented. There are two different guys that play on Georgia's team: younger guys and older guys. Here's the exact quote from Kirby from over the weekend. He said, "We have a segment on our team that's within its first year of being here." He said that includes a this year's mid-years and last year's mid-years and summer enrollees. He's talking about the two essentially freshmen, the old freshman and the new freshman. He said that's almost 50% of our team, and we have another 50% that has been here for two or greater years. We are in two distinctly different spots. Our job, talking about the coaching staff, our job is to accelerate the learning process for the first group, the younger group, continue the learning process to push and create depth out of our older half. I'm pleased with the work we've done this spring, but I'm not pleased with where we are. That's not abnormal coming from Kirby Smart, a coach who's done a very good job over the years of winning national championships, conference championships, etc. One of the guys that he was talking about that's left is Kelee Ringo. We've got a very small amount of dog instructions with Keelee's signature on them. We also have some double dogs with Stetson's signature, although we have a lot fewer of the double dogs with Stetson. These are awesome graduation and Father's Day gifts. When you start thinking about where Georgia's at, coming into last season, they had 80. Well, this is slightly updated. They had 88 scholarship players, but three of those guys were COVID, so they don't count. One of those guys was Stetson. That said, you know, last year's freshman class was 30 guys. They just signed 24-ish players, whatever it is. Anything, you only got 85 guys. So this team is young for sure, but a lot of the players that are going to play for them are not young. This is an experienced group, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Zion Lowe, Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse. Now you've got the younger guys who have played on the defensive line: Williams, Ingram Dawkins, Bear Alexander. They've got plenty of guys that have played a lot of ball for them that are coming back on the defensive line. At linebacker, you hardly saw a time where Dumas Johnson and Smile Munden were off the field. Same thing you could say, well, not the same exact thing, but Chaz Chambliss, Xavier Sori, these guys played a lot of snaps for them in the last few years, and then obviously Walker as well. In the secondary, a young group, but an experienced group: Bullard, Lassiter, and now you've got Starks as well. I mean, those guys were young a year ago. They played a lot of football for Georgia last year. So that's the sort of younger group. I mean, when you start talking about older players, it's going to be the defensive line. You can really lean on that. You can really lean on that during a season. When I look this way, which is to my left, that's looking at the board that I keep. Where they're inexperienced, well, quarterback, first of all, they do not have a player who has started a game. They have a player who's played a lot of football, so to speak. And Carson Beck, he played in 7 games a season ago. But the offensive line returns Tate Ratledge, Truss, it returns Mims, Van Pran, who is probably the most important returning player on this team outside of Brock Bowers. They're going to have to figure out what they're doing at right tackle, I think. But they've got a lot of options there. At tight end, they have probably the best returning player in college football in Brock Bowers. Receiver is deep for sure, is something Ryan talked about. Running back is deep. But at receiver, this is not a Georgia group that has got an explosive playmaking guy that you're scared to death of. Well, they don't have a George Pickens, to be more specific. They do have a Lad McConkey. They do have a Arian Smith. They've got a lot of guys. And I understand what Kirby's saying. When you look at, so Georgia's played in 3 national championship games in the last 6 years. Okay. The only other program that's done that is Alabama. Let me just go through the teams that have played for the national championship the last 6 years. So that's 17 on. So Georgia, Bama, In 17, Bama, Clemson. In 18, Clemson, LSU. In 19. So at that point, Alabama and Clemson both have 2 appearances in the national championship game. Clemson doesn't come back, so they're stuck at 2. 3, Alabama, Ohio State in 2020, 2021, Alabama, Georgia, 2022, Georgia, Texas Christian. So Alabama's played in it 4 times, if my math is right, losing twice, once to Clemson and once to the Dogs, and then winning it twice, once against Georgia and once against Ohio State. Georgia's been 3 times, winning it once against Alabama, once against TCU, and losing it once to Alabama. And note in that, give all that context, my screen is just going absolutely nuts here. Oh, I know what's going on. I will try not to be so active. I see what's happening here. This is what happens when you have children. Um, yeah. What I was going to say was 2 of those 3 teams that Kirby had were older teams. So that was the 17 team, except it wasn't very old at quarterback, and the 21 team. Both those teams had older players. When you start thinking about Lorenzo, Nick, Davin Bellamy, Sony Michelle, that was an older bunch of players, okay, that played for Georgia and Kirby in 2017. In 2021, you had, Nakobe, Jordan, um, just a slew of older players that won the national championship. Jamari, Zamir, James Cook. This was an older bunch, a mature bunch. Let me just reference back with Dog Instruction, because half the time I forget guys who were on the team. But just in this one image here, you got, Nakobe, Quay Walker, but even in that image there, and Robert Beal was in this picture. Zion Logue was in this image. There were guys that were sort of younger players that didn't, Brock Bowers was a young player in 2021. But the basic feel of that team was an older players team. That's not what happened a year ago. A year ago with this Georgia team, you're talking about a younger team. And, whether you mean you know here's a good example. I'm trying to go to a particular page, which I may well give up on in a second here, but all of these players were not one of these guys played a lot in 2021. They were all, I mean, these returning these linebackers that were starters, they're returning this season. They were starters. The game 1, they played the entire year basically in there. And here are 2 guys that didn't play hardly at all in 2022, 2021 as well, which is Dumas Johnson and Lassiter. So, this guy right here may well be having a lot on his shoulders, but I would say to Kirby, or well, just generally speaking, the commentary is, Kirby's had younger teams before. That's not preventing them from winning the national championship. Coaches like knowing what their teams are like, and that means older players typically. And what we're seeing more and more, and I think Kirby knows this going into the season and going into a lot of these seasons, is that from here on out, unlike in the past, in 17 for sure, your teams, they're going to be younger or they're going to be inexperienced in your program because anymore guys just leave, whether you're talking about portal, whether you're talking about going pro. The turnover rate is pretty exceptional in college football these days. That's not, I mean, it's just I don't have a problem with it, to be honest with you. I think too much is being made of that. That's the coach's problem, but that's what all the money's for. Okay. So I don't have a problem with that. It is going to become a new reality. I mean, just look at Texas right now at quarterback. Quinn Ewers is there, and then you also got Arch Manning. Well, no, both those guys are still young players. There's not going to be a lot of sixth-year quarterbacks like Stetson Bennett or even JT Daniels, who's starting at his 4th school. That is crazy. More and more, at the premier institutions, Georgia, Ohio State, etc., you're going to see, generally speaking, guys go three and out. That's what's going to happen. NIL may pull guys back in a little bit. It didn't with Kelee. I mean, Kelee Ringo was a guy that, in theory, could have come back, but NIL wasn't so big a deal for him that he would skip out on, playing in the league. So I just I think we're going to see turnover. This is the new normal, and this is what it is. And he is stating a reality, which is that his program is going to be dealing with it being younger. But I think that's going to happen from here on out for Kirby and the Georgia Bulldogs.